And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to cover native app development. So we had the earlier session that talked about HTML5. What I'm going to talk about is if you've got a streaming media solution, an app or a game, anything that you've written for Android API 17 and up, that will usually just work on these devices. What we're going to cover is all of the tips that I've seen when customers try and port those apps, what makes a really good experience, and what do you need to think about so that you can give your customers the best experience possible. There's two URLs, so everything I'm going to talk about you're going to find up here. The first one, if you're interested in these products themselves, just go to Amazon, and it's /Fire TV. That'll give you all of the information about the product, the prices, apps, games, videos, all the information about what it does. And then for developing for the device, it's just a developer in front of Amazon. So developer.amazon.com, Fire TV. One of the things I also do, besides speaking at conferences, is we have a blog. And there's a bunch of blog posts around this, everything from native development to the HTML5. You'll find all of the links to the blog right at the top for developer.amazon.com as well. All right, so just those are the two URLs to remember. Everything we cover today, you can go and find out there. If you're not familiar, for these devices, for you to get in front of customers, so you have a media app today, you put it on Fire TV. It's not an isolated one-off app store. It's part of this ecosystem that is in, I say 236 countries and territories, right? That's basically all over the world. There's less than 236 countries. All of our Amazon customers have access to this. Amazon's currently over 250 million active purchasing customers today. There are over 400,000 apps on these stores, and they run. Does anybody here have an Android phone or tablet? If you have the Amazon shopping app, that's the app store. So you can actually search on there. You can get instant video through there. And so customers, when they're shopping on Amazon, if they do something like they search for hiking boots, let's say, and you've got video app that plays some of the top trails for hiking, that app will actually be visible on Amazon.com. So there's a lot of cross-selling that happens between the physical and digital. And this is the shopping app that you're seeing here, so you can see all apps and games, and you can see instant video. Now, if a customer buys your app for TV, and you ever decide to move on to Android phones and Android tablets and Amazon devices, they do not have to purchase your app again. You can just simply use that same SKU, and you just upload us a new APK or an updated APK, and your customers can now get your content on all of their devices as well. So it's fully integrated across the entire experience. Does that make sense? Kind of how you can access this stuff? Okay, great. So let's talk about what it costs to submit this to us. It costs absolutely nothing. You register for free. You just go to developer.amazon.com, and right here, so if you've got an APK, you'll see that browse button. We have a warehouse full of devices. So we actually have tablets and phones and TVs, all of that. You just give us your APK, and within 30 seconds, you'll get a result back if this is going to run or not. So if you're at the beginning of a project and you're like, hey, I'm looking at targeting TV, let me just see at a code level if my existing media app is going to run, you'll know. And then you can put in your email address, and we'll send you a full report within a couple hours that actually shows you performance statistics. So you'll see things like CPU utilization and threads and all of that. And that's completely free. You don't have to target our devices. If you just want to test on Android devices, please go ahead and use that service as well. And it's called the App Testing Service. And then one other thing that you get as part of being in the developer ecosystem is something called Amazon Coins. Has anybody heard of Amazon Coins if you're an Amazon customer today? All right, so coins are a free currency. You get rewarded for doing things. So if a customer today is downloading a game, they may receive 100 coins. They're basically 1-to-1 ratio. So in US, it's pennies. In the UK, it's pounds. And in Germany, it'll be euros. And if I go and I download a game and I get 100 coins, maybe you have a subscription service for your media app. In-app purchases, I could use those coins in your media app. This is a promotion we did with Blizzard for Hearthstone as well. And so people could buy card packs. And all of this is part of the same ecosystem. So customers have coins. They can use it to go ahead and purchase content whether that's on a tablet, phone, or a TV. Make sense? Okay. So Android 4.2.2 compatible, so API 7 and up is TV and phone. Our tablets do support API 19, and actually we're pushing out right now for the Fire Phone API 19 as well. So as long as you're 17 and up, you'll be able to target all of that. If you're using Android Studio, which is now Google's recommended tool for Android development, all of the sample code runs in that. You can just target API 17. And if you're using Xamarin, anybody here using Xamarin or Unity or anything like that? All of that is fully supported too. So you have plugins for in-app purchasing if you want to go ahead and monetize your content as well. This is what it looks like for Android. So you're probably familiar right here with the Android SDK manager. So I'm simply going to put an S3 bucket for Fire TV, and then this Fire TV SDK add-on will come right around API 17. So if you've got an existing APK, just load up Android Studio or Eclipse, enter this URL, and this is at developer.amazon.com, Fire TV I showed you, and you'll pull down everything. This has sample code, documentation, and then all of the jar files if you want to take advantage of in-app purchasing or anything like that. If you're using Xamarin, Xamarin's even easier. You simply just target API 17 and you're done. And you can add components. So when you go in, you right-click, and you say, Amazon, I need Fire OS, Fire Phone, or Fire TV. You'll see all of this comes down as well, and you can pull those samples right in. So all of this is integrated. We're not asking you to go ahead and learn anything new. Just use all of your existing tools. We do have support for a lot of third-party frameworks as well. So like I mentioned, Unity, Xamarin, GameSalad, any of those kind of frameworks, you have the ability to go ahead and target this. The portal is very simple. We kind of keep it streamlined, just like the AWS portal is. So once you've registered, again, registration is free. You'll get this dashboard. And then I simply click on Add a New App. And you'll see we got a couple of options. So I have Android, which is what I'm going to show here. Mobile web is what we showed earlier for HTML5. As well as PC and Mac if you're an indie developer and you're looking at selling Steam keys and stuff like that. All of this is going to be sold through Amazon.com. And then I'm going to fill out a submission form, so just the name. I can give it a SKU and then the type of category my app would be in. And then I'm going to go ahead and upload the APK. If you've used that app testing service I showed earlier, all of this will already be filled out for you. We'll parse your manifest. We'll fill all these things out. You can put Amazon DRM on or not. So if you have a free app and you monetize through ads or you monetize through in-app purchases, you can feel free to take the Amazon DRM off and people can copy that, put that anywhere. Otherwise, if you put that on, we are going to protect that for you. So if somebody buys your TV version and they try to load it on their phone, it won't work. And that you just check yes or no. Now you also have the option of submitting multiple APKs. So if you are the type of company that likes to keep one version and go ahead and target based on feature detection, we allow you to have one single APK you can give us. If you want to go ahead and do a specific Fire TV version, then you can go ahead and upload that. And it kind of looks like this. So you'll see at the top, I've got Amazon Fire TV, and I just toggle on for that APK which versions I want to select. So you can see I'm going ahead and I'm targeting Fire TV here. But I could also do both. And then if I select some of these other tabs, maybe in the future I want to go ahead and expand. I've seen success in TV. I want to go ahead and deploy that onto phones. You can see here we have full BlackBerry support. Our store is actually the store on all of these BlackBerry devices, as well as Android devices. So I can go ahead on Amazon and Android phones and tablets. Does that make sense? Okay. So global reach. It's all integrated and part of Amazon. We do a lot of cross-promotion so that your apps can be discovered. And then, of course, we sell the hardware. So This is what the actual device looks like. This is the game controller. This is actually our game package here. It comes with a controller, Fire TV, the built-in remote, and an HDMI cable. And it's a device built on top of Android. So API 17 or higher, your apps and games are just going to run. The game controller is optional. This is something customers can buy off Amazon and kind of get that full gaming experience. But the remotes are all included. So you don't have to worry about a customer not having some type of physical remote where they have to go and they have to download an app or anything. All remotes are included with these devices. It's incredibly powerful hardware. So you're looking at, and this is across both tablets and phones, by the way. Everything is now quad-core Snapdragon. You've got a 320 GPU, so if you're doing any kind of accelerated graphics, and then you've got 2 gigs of RAM. So you've got really high-performant game experiences. And that Fire TV, that runs $99. And then obviously if a customer has Prime, there'll be free shipping for them to get that device. We also have a popular device, Fire TV Stick. We announced this was the fastest selling device ever in the history of Amazon when it was released, both in the US and we recently launched in the UK as well, and that pre-order sold out there as well. So together, you know, these devices, you're looking at least dual-core processors. You're looking at a price point starting at $39 and going up to $99. If anybody travels like I do, you take the Fire TV Stick. We do allow you to connect to hotel Wi-Fi and enter your credentials through the remote. So last night I was watching the new Game of Thrones episode through HBO Go in my hotel room. So it's it's great if you do travel. It's great if you've got a student who's in a dorm and they've got to enter credentials for wireless. The remote is built in and you're basically up and running. You know, you get Netflix, HBO Go, and 1,000 other different apps, including all of the Amazon content. The Fire TV, the $99 one, we've also just added USB storage. So these devices both come with 8 gigs, but if you have a need for something that uses more storage, we give you the ability in your Android manifest file to tell the app to install to external storage. Customers can just plug into USB some storage there and your app will get installed there as well. Make sense? Okay. So now that you understand the reach, the ecosystem, and what these devices are all about, I'm going to give you the top kind of 10 tips that I've seen that have helped people when they're bringing their apps from a phone and a tablet experience up into a TV experience. So the first tip is you want to think about the 10-foot experience. And what exactly is the 10-foot experience? So typically if I'm on a phone or tablet, I have this piece of glass, right, that's very close to me. I can see lots and lots of details. But when we're using any kind of media app, any kind of video, we're sitting far away. Most Android apps today are not designed for this. And so, here's a quote from Wikipedia. We really need to think about having intuitive layout. It's user-centered design. And so what wouldn't work on a tablet or phone is really going to be the way that we integrate for TV. And I think if I start showing you some screenshots, this will make sense, right? So you want to keep it simple, and you want to not overload your customer with information right away. And so when you're in the standard screen for Fire TV, you have this simple navigation down the left for all of your content, your apps, your games, movies, TVs, watch list, things like that, and then I'm going to have rows. And we've included a template, so when you download the Android SDK, you're going to see this standard template, and we call them screens as we navigate through. And so all of this navigation has been built around the idea of being remote friendly. Every one of these devices comes with the remote. This is the remote here. You can see has media control buttons. So I've got forward and reverse, play and pause. I have the Android standard buttons here, so home, menu, and back. I've got a D-pad, and then I can hold down the microphone, and I can actually use my voice to search for content. Anybody here see the Gary Busey commercials? Right? So you can just hold that down, and I could say whatever I want. I've got 2 little girls at home, so I can say princess movies, and it brings up everything across all content. that they can watch. Now, what you want to think about here is you want to focus your design of your navigation around the core buttons of back, up, down, left, and right. Okay? You think standard Android navigation for moving through the app. So you've got your back buttons and your menu buttons. And then these media buttons, they're only going to be reserved for when you're actually playing the video back. So allowing the customer to go forward, back, pause content. One of the things that we did, for example, is let's say you've got a list view. You've got something like that in your existing Android app. We actually enumerate through all of that. So you don't have to go back in and highlight what a remote would look like. We draw that yellow highlighted box for you. And then as the customer moves the D-pad around, we're going to go ahead and figure out where we are on that current control. So that's done automatically for you. If you're using standard Android controls, they'll just show up. And you'll see we keep the same pattern for the controller. So a customer can connect a controller, and they're going to have that same D-pad right here for navigation, the back, home, menu button, and then the media buttons are down here. And then if they're playing a game, they get access to the trigger buttons and then the analog control joysticks. Does that make sense? So as long as you're targeting that standard kind of D-pad navigation, customers will be able to navigate your media apps very, very easily. Now the way that you do that in your existing Android code is really simplified. You're just going to look for D-pad up, down, left, and right events. The D-pad center, so when I push on the remote and I push in the middle, that's equal to the enter key in Android code, and you can basically override the on key down method for your view. So what you're seeing me do here is I just have an on key down. This is just in the standard view for the regular main page, and you can see here for each thing, what do I want to do? I'm just returning handled. And that's how easy it is to handle navigation. You may already be doing some of that for touch events in your existing Android apps. So you're basically taking what you had in touch and you're just looking for the on-key down event. Now, if a customer is using a controller and you want to support kind of those analog joysticks, you're simply going to target axis X and axis Y values off the onGeneric motion event. So you can see right here I've got a float for X and Y. And I'm just going to return whatever that is. And I'm looking for on key down right up here for the X button, which you saw on the controller, right? We kind of had X, A, and B. And that's how simplified it is to use controller support. So it's not a lot of extra code. You're probably already doing this to go ahead and get touch points. And you get up and running pretty easy in a native Android app, just handling onGeneric motion and on key down. So if we're thinking about the navigation paradigm, the first thing is you don't want to hide everything in a hamburger menu, right? You want to give access to the content in a way that doesn't overwhelm the user, in a way that makes sense in the 10-foot experience. So what we've done is we've divided things into what we call screens, views, and flows. So you're completely up to you how you want to design your app. This is just the sample that we came up with that we're offering as guidance for you. So we're not going to fail you if you're not using this kind of standard. But I think this is a way to kind of get your head around that 10-foot experience. Because if I've seen any apps fail, it's really around how do I design this so that content comes forward in the best way possible. And so here's an example from the actual sample app. And the first thing you'll notice on the home screen is that all of the icons are very large and they're easy to navigate. So I basically have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of content that I can do a D-pad right before I start to scroll through new content. Right? So you're basically talking 5 rows across, 3 high in a grid here on the home page. And if you've never done TV before, when you just take your phone out and put both thumbs on that screen, you'll be surprised how much space your thumbs actually take up. And if you take a phone app and you throw it up on the screen, you'll always be surprised how little those same icons that your thumb covered actually take up. So these are way bigger than you think they're going to be. And then if I select something, what I'm doing now is I'm showing and highlighting the actual content. So in this case, it's the full row, so that it's easy from far away and immediately to know that I'm now on that row of content. And then when I push to the right, I can scroll through those items, and those items look like this. So this becomes a 1D list view. We've now eliminated all of the other rows, and we're only showing those. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items here, and now you're seeing a little bit of the next space to navigate. And then what we have is we only have 2 buttons here. So I can add to my watch list, and now a watch list works across all of Amazon Video. If I add something to my watch list on my phone, when I go to my TV, it's on my watch list. If I add it on my TV and I later watch Amazon Instant Video on my iPhone or my iPad, it'll all be there. And so it's a catch-all for customers. If they find some interesting content, they simply add it to the watch list. What we found here is these actions are some of the most important things that customers are going to be using as they navigate content. So we did a recent update that actually allows them to rent content right from here. So they don't have to click one more step. They can just do right here, and then it immediately starts. And that, you see a lot more consumption and interaction just at that level. So you need to think about, as you're designing your app, at what point do I want that customer to be able to select a piece of content, save a piece of content, or go ahead and purchase a piece of content. And you may want to do some A/B testing around where you actually see more engagement with that. And then when I go through, now you'll see the detailed view. So obviously I can begin to watch it, add it to favorites, or get all of my purchase options. But it's at this point now where I'm showing similar content, so I can kind of do my cross-sells, and then you can see all the information up here. IMDb is actually part of Amazon, so all of this content is integrated with IMDb. And we just did a patch for Fire TV that we now do IMDb integration while you're watching the movie. So you may have seen some things where you're watching Star Wars, and then you'll see at the top some Star Wars trivia and actors. So you'll see information about Mark Hamill, and you have the ability to navigate through all of that stuff while you're watching the TV. And a customer simply pushes up or down on their remote. They'll get all of that extra metadata from IMDb, and then they can push down or up again, and that content goes away. So chances are, if you've got an existing application that does support a landscape mode, that your content is going to work perfectly as far as aspect ratio goes. But then you need to think about things like button state, being able to select information, navigating with the remote like I talked about, so only having a certain amount of rows of information, and then clearly letting them understand where they're going to navigate to a new screen. Does that make sense? Kind of getting your head around navigating that content? Okay. So who here likes working with multiple resolutions with Android, right? What we did for this, we wanted to make it as simplified as possible, and based upon the amount of 1080p TVs that are now being sold, what we did is we allow you to target 1080p. So you're simply going to build for XHDPI, and then we're going to hardware downscale that to 720p or 480p for older televisions. So this makes it very easy. If you're targeting a device, you're targeting Fire TV. In fact, a lot of our tablets are 1080p. Or Android, you want to target Android phones or tablets, just target 1080p and we'll handle all of that for you. So you basically got XHDPI for your pixel density. And then orientation. So obviously the orientation of the Fire TV never changes. It's always going to come back as 0 as a result for get orientation or get rotation. And so that will be locked. If you're using any code for that, you no longer need that because there's no ability to move between landscape or portrait. Now, when you start thinking about different resolutions, maybe you want to shift everything now to 1080p, but you have a customer base that is still running on older devices, or maybe you want to support some 4:3 ratios. What we do, and you saw earlier in the portal, is the ability to do APKs. Where I've seen customers have the most success is you're going to target 1080p, and then you're just going to go ahead and you're going to create different layouts. And you're going to include different drawables. So maybe your icons are rendered at a different resolution. Maybe they're scaled a little bit differently. And you're just going to throw everything into your resource folder for your Android device. And then you can have multiple APKs or the same APK that's targeting all of this. And it makes it a lot easier to be able to move across all these different kinds of screens. And this is just a bit.ly I set up for you. This goes on to Google's documentation for handling multiple device screens and resources. So really just think about, you may already have stuff at 1080p. When you start targeting those older devices, it's really just about having the layouts and the drawables for your app and then including them. Now overscan, you're only going to hit this on TV. You won't see this on phone or tablet, but you don't see this too much now, but you do see this on a lot of older TVs, and customers can have an older TV. This red area here is basically overscan. So my suggestion would be to have 1 pixel around the side as a minimum that you're not rendering any content to. And that way your customer is seeing all of that content. Nothing is being written across the screen in this red bar. Now with everything being flat and rendered at high quality, we don't see that. But you can't assume, you're going to know your customers more than me, what type of screen that they're actually on. And even more important than overscan, something that I think I've seen, it happens all the time, right? Just walk into any store where there's TVs or go visit a relative, is how someone's actually tuned this TV device. What color temperature, what do the blacks look like, what do the whites look like? And so here, cool colors are going to work better than warm colors. I've seen this in some of the Amazon apps when we're using yellow or orange a lot. That's going to look like pink on some other TVs based on how it's being rendered. So if your app, you're using a lot of these colors on this side, you want to think about maybe putting in some more blues or some grays so that the colors that represent your brand and your logo and your app are actually going to look good across all of Fire TV. And in fact, this may be the first time that you're actually seeing this where the colors don't necessarily jibe very well in your application, because we're all used to these beautiful screens that we have on phones and tablets. And that may or may not necessarily be the case when a customer is actually running that application on a TV. Make sense? Okay. So we thought about multiple resources and how to navigate this thing and then how to reproduce the color. What do we do when we want to interact with our customer, not just kind of display video and grids? And so I've seen the need for notifications based on things like a media app where maybe a piece of content is coming in, right? A new piece of content. A music track is shifting, and you just want a little piece of information for a couple of seconds that talks about what that song is and who that artist is. And we fully support this. So if you are using Android notifications today, it will compile and your app will run just fine. But obviously the user isn't going to see anything because there's no system tray. So what we've done is we've extended your standard Android notifications, and we give you the ability to do 2 kinds of notifications that actually be rendered on the screen versus in a system tray. And the first is informational, so this is just general kind of optional actions. And the second one is going to be media type of notifications for content that's playing in the background. So let me show you a picture of what some of these would be. So over here you can see this is informational. So this would be something that would just pop up, give me information about what my app is doing. So maybe I'm in the home screen doing something, and behind the scenes that media app has downloaded new content or done something else. You can display it with an informational notification. It's a pending intent is basically the action that you're going to look for. Pending intent, sent content intent. And this is going to allow you to show, you can see at the top, here's a notification where I could hit the hamburger menu for more options. And here's one where I have play or dismiss. So I can have both buttons or information that they can get that's additional from the sample. I can also do a modal type of notification, so something so important that I need to make sure that that customer cannot exit the app without making a selection. So you also have that option to do that, and while this is active, they can't do anything else until they go ahead and submit. So maybe this is something like I've purchased content, and you want to make sure that that customer accepts whatever you have for your content that came down. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, when you start to think about content coming across a whole bunch of different platforms and a bunch of different devices, you need to think about syncing that content. And there's things that we do in AWS, where you may hear of AWS Mobile Services. There's Cognito, which is an identity kind of management service you can do. And you can also do something called Game Circle directly on Fire TV that has a couple of different things. And the first one is going to allow any kind of device to go across and sync data. And we call that Whisper Sync. If any of you have a Kindle, you may have seen Whisper Sync before, where that content, no matter where I'm reading that book, if I put down a Kindle or I put down a Kindle app and I pick up the Kindle app on my phone, the book's exactly where I left off. We've ported that same technology to Fire TV. It's just a couple lines of code, and you basically set up the string value that you want to sync. So it could be where somebody is in the middle of your content. When I come back, that video is going to go ahead and play. It also gives you the ability to do achievements. So maybe if I've watched a certain amount of video, I've hit an hour worth of content, I can have that. I can also do leaderboards. And so these Game Circle achievements and leaderboards sync across everything. And I can see what somebody's doing as far as content on one app versus what I'm doing. I forget which media app it was. It might have been Amazon Instant Video. I unlocked an achievement for something that I had watched, which was pretty cool. But this is all optional, and all this technology is there built in for you to take advantage of. This is what it looks like. So you can see right here, I'm pushing the little Game Circle icon on the controller. That's the dedicated Game Circle that pops up. This is Riptide 2. You can see here achievements, leaderboards, what my high score is, what my profile is, and how long I've actually been using that game or app for. Make sense? Okay. So I've got these leaderboards, I'm syncing data, I'm rendering okay, I've got all my controls, and now I'm at the stage where I'm thinking about submitting. So the first thing you're going to want to think about is if you've got screenshots for these in other stores, you're going to want to think about how that looks at a higher resolution. So you can see this is actually how big it is on Fire TV. I have the ability to zoom things up. They're thumbnails at first, and then as I expand to full screen and I go through, you're going to go ahead and see the actual resolution. So you want the ability to basically capture your app running full screen. And you can do that through standard Android debugging. So this is an ADB Connect. This is the way I do it. I just shell out, and then you just write to a PNG file. And this is my actual app running at 1080p. If you don't want to do an ADB Connect and you have a Fire TV, we just did support for USB debugging as well. So now you can plug directly in to the device, do the same type of ADB commands, and then pull these nice high-quality PNG files of your actual app running versus trying to take a picture of the TV or something like that. So submission tips, these are just a couple tips where I've seen some of the media apps fail and things you need to think about for your own app. So the first one is to make sure that you really are targeting that 1080p. We've seen apps submitted that were clearly still rendered for phone. They did not look well. It was not a good customer experience when they were run on a TV at 1080p. So just make sure you're targeting 1080p. And then when you scale something up at 1080p, so maybe you've switched to XHDPI, but all of your drawables are still rendered at a very low quality. Maybe it was an old phone version or something like that. If we're seeing a lot of misaligned elements and scaling and clipping and pixelization, we've seen things where text isn't being rendered or text is being rendered over UI elements. Stuff like that, you want to check for all of that so you don't have those visual defects. You will fail for something like that because it's just going to add customer confusion as they're trying to navigate your content. And then text entry, it's very important that you have limited text entry. On a phone or tablet, it's easy to pull up a keyboard. On a remote, on a TV experience, it's not fun. And so you want to have the ability to really limit when that happens. You know, maybe it's to do a search and that's about it. You don't want to have part of your core navigation that I talked before with screens and layouts and those 1D layouts. You'll notice there was no text entry involved at all. Now we do support, we have a Fire TV app across iPhone, Android devices, and our own tablets and phones that customers can use, and then they can use that to do text entry, or they could use the voice as well. But just as a good design guideline, you want to make sure that you limit the amount of that. And you really want to keep the size of the app down to 2 gigs or less. This becomes a little less restrictive now that I talked about where you can edit the manifest file and tell your app to install to SD storage. But you don't want to count on the customer having that SD storage there. And so think about being 2 gigs or less. These devices are 8 gigs in size, but at 4 gigs, you're really looking at, you know, there's going to be no more content left on that device for you, especially if you're downloading additional assets. So really think about APK size. Up, down, left, right. So remember that remote input first that I talked about, using that D-pad, and that'll work across both the remote that is included across the Fire TV and stick, as well as the controller. So being able to navigate is hugely important. And then also being able to navigate all of the elements. I've seen some areas fail where it was older Android code with a web view that was not navigatable with a D-pad. It didn't scroll or anything like that. So make sure that you're looking through all of your views and your controls to make sure all of that fits. Make sense? Seems straightforward enough? All right, so Amazon.com Fire TV, developer.amazon.com Fire TV is all the stuff. And then I'll throw my content info back on the board. I'm happy to answer any of your questions that you might have on this, whether it's Fire TV, Kindle, or phone. All right, thanks. And you can come on.